The Young and the Restless, spoilers for Wednesday, July 23rd, reveal Kyle telling Nikki the truth about Victor's deal with Audra, Lily standing her ground with Phyllis, and Kane questioning Amanda's loyalty. Kyle's not going to rest on his laurels now that he's blasted Audra over her plan to get him to betray Claire and break her heart. On Wednesday's show, the Abbott heir is going to push back even further by letting Nikki know what Victor's scheme was. Nikki cares about Claire deeply, so she's not likely going to take this news lightly. Victor will likely be more livid upon learning that Kyle didn't fall for Audra's charms and that he told Nikki about his scheme. Lily is the guest who has been most affected by the trip to Kane's estate. She was reunited with her ex, and she saw the new man in her life, Damien, fall victim to a murder. Meanwhile, Phyllis has been staunchly defending Kane. She believes him to be innocent. On Wednesday's show, watch for Lily to stand her ground with Phyllis. The fiery redhead may be getting along with Sharon better these days, but that doesn't mean Phyllis is holding back from going after other adversaries. Phyllis is coming from a business perspective, but Lily is dealing with emotions. This sets the stage for a showdown that can't be missed. Kane employed Amanda to do his bidding by having her go to Genoa City and get folks on board with his big gathering. We imagine he pays her well, but on Wednesday's show, Kane is going to question Amanda's loyalty. This may have started when Phyllis took it upon herself to inform Kane, in Amanda's presence, that Amanda wanted to move up the ladder. That did not sit well with Amanda. Now, Kane is starting to have some questions about Amanda. Maybe Phyllis shouldn't act as her pal's publicist, no matter how good her intentions may be. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Pulse Canvas. It's me, Julie here. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Keep watching, so let's dive into today's video. The Young and the Restless scoop for Tuesday, July 22nd, reveals Nikki Newman and Victor Newman will be furious with Kane Ashby. Also coming up, Sharon Newman and Nick Newman will be locked in a room. Plus, Kyle Abbott will tell Diane Jenkins and Jack Abbott about his deal with Victor. And Audra Charles will lie. Y&R spoilers tease Jack, and Diane will run into Kyle. They'll say they just saw Carter and a security guy strong-arming Nick and Sharon. Jack will add it looked like they are being detained against their will. Diane will tell Kyle they were worried about him. I was being detained, but for very different reasons, he'll reply. He'll add he thinks Audra made a deal with Victor to seduce him. Diane will ask if she came on to him. He'll say yes, but he didn't fall for it. Then they'll ask what offer he made Victor. I told him that if I ever hurt Claire, I would pay him $5 million and leave Genoa City for good. Kyle will tell his shocked parents. That's why I have to find Victor, he'll say. I have to find Victor to let him know that Audra failed. But Jack and Diane will tell him he needs to steer clear of Victor for now. I hear you, but he went out of his way to hurt Claire, he'll reply. When his actions hurt her, that's where I draw the line. Meanwhile, Carter will lock Nick and Sharon in what looks like a storage room. Nick will press his face against the door and say he doesn't hear anyone out there. Sharon will sit on a chair, hyperventilating, as she flashes back to being locked in the psyche facility. Is this reminding you of the clinic? He'll ask. But he'll say this is different. People know they're there. Sharon will say she can't believe Kane would do this. Then she'll start to panic. Nick will tell her to take some deep breaths. Don't think about the clinic, he'll encourage her. Stay calm, stay positive. In the drinks car, Victor will spot Audra and will ask her how things are proceeding with Kyle. The idea was you would seduce Kyle Abbott so I could prove to my granddaughter that he's unworthy of her, he'll say. Audra will say there have been heat and sparks between them. However, Kyle thinks he has the upper hand. But trust me when I say that everything is going according to plan. Victor will tell her she has until tonight to meet her end of the bargain. Then Michael Baldwin will walk in. It seems Kane has placed Nick and Sharon under house arrest, he'll tell Victor. Carter himself told Nikki, Lauren, and me the news. Victor will ask if Chance knows, and Michael will say it's unclear. He'll offer to help, but Victor will make it clear he doesn't need him, and he'll decide to confront Kane by himself. Then Lauren Fenmore will show up, and they'll discuss Victor and the trip. In the garden area, Nikki will confront Kane about detaining her son and Sharon. He'll say his attorney advised him to do so. "Did Chance sign off on this?" Nikki will ask. But Kane will say Chance has other things to worry about. "Release them now!" Nikki will demand. Kane will tell her they're in a secure location, where Nick won't try to kill me again. Nikki will tell him it's ridiculous. "You can come after my company," she'll add. "But when you go after my children, you better be prepared to deal with me." Finally, Victor will come along. "You'll release my son and his friend Sharon immediately," he'll shout. Kane will ask, "Or what?" "You don't want to find out," Victor will reply. Then he'll accuse Kane of using his son and Sharon as a bargaining chip for Chancellor. "Look me in the eye and tell me that isn't true." Victor will add that Kane killed a man and is blaming his son. "You release him, or else there will be hell to pay." But Carter will come along, whisper in Kane's ear, and he'll say he has something to attend to. So, Victor will follow Carter. Keep reading The Soap Scoop for Young and The Restless Spoilers and News. And make sure to also join our Y&R Facebook group or leave us a reply in our comments section. But if you miss an episode, don't fret. You can watch The Young and the Restless online at cbs.com. On the Monday, July 21st episode of The Young and the Restless, Billy ended his partnership with Jack. Audra's denials fell on deaf ears, and Carter placed Nick and Sharon under house arrest. In Kyle's sleeping car in Nice, Audra and a towel-clad Kyle kissed passionately. She led him toward the bed, where he smothered Audra's neck in kisses. "I'm on to you, Audra," he whispered in her ear. Audra haughtily questioned whether Kyle actually believed she was there to seduce him. He compared it to how she'd planned every other move she'd made, and he mocked her, saying she felt safe with him. Audra defended that she'd been vulnerable and scared, and what had happened had been spontaneous. Kyle thought using her boyfriend's brother's murder to manipulate him into bed was low. Audra retorted that Kyle had been just as into it as she'd been. Kyle taunted that he'd learned to fake it as well as she did, maybe even better. Audra cried that she'd been horrified by Damien's death and devastated for Nate and Amy, but Kyle imagined Nate would have a hard time understanding how she'd expressed her grief. Audra claimed that she'd panicked and turned to Kyle in desperation. She swore that she'd never expected things to turn out that way, and she would have pulled back if he hadn't. Audra chalked it up to losing control of her emotions. Kyle implored her to just admit that he'd beaten her, and Victor. Audra feigned ignorance about what the situation had to do with Victor. Kyle guessed that Victor was the one pulling the strings as the only investor in her company. Audra asserted that Victor believed in her and Vibrante. Kyle conceded that she had talents, just not in cosmetics. He contemplated how Nate would feel about it, but she spat that Nate would never believe anything Kyle told him. Kyle surmised that Victor had bankrolled Vibrante in exchange for Audra tricking Kyle into bed to screw up his relationship with Claire and break his agreement with Victor. Audra denied having an arrangement with Victor, and she called Kyle an egotistical jerk who thought everything was about him. Kyle taunted that Audra had failed miserably. Audra retorted that it was pathetic that Kyle had needed to sign an agreement with Victor to continue seeing Claire. Kyle raged that Audra didn't care about anyone but herself, and Nate would figure that out himself if he hadn't already. Kyle divulged that he'd only played along with her social media idea to string her along. He continued that he'd only kissed her to see how far she'd take it, and she'd been willing to go all the way. Audra sensed that Kyle had been in the moment with her until he'd stopped himself. He stressed that the key was that he'd stopped, whereas she hadn't because Victor's money depended on her sealing the deal. Kyle accused Audra of being angry because he'd beaten her at her own game. Audra huffed that everyone had seen him flirting with her since they'd gotten there, and she was the one who'd stopped him from going any further. Kyle declared that everyone knew who she was and what she was willing to do to get what she wanted, and he was relieved he no longer had to pretend to like her stupid perfume war idea. He doubted Vibrante would ever see the light of day. Kyle admonished Audra for being so sure of herself that she'd overlooked how deeply he loved Claire. Kyle intended to let Victor know Audra had failed and she'd be ruined again. He ordered her to get out. In the dining car, Phyllis groaned that she hated being stuck between Kane and Nick. Sharon was taken aback that Phyllis was still concerned about a job when a man had just died the night before. Phyllis swore that Kane hadn't been responsible for Damien's death. Phyllis groused about Nick calling her a monster who was protecting a murderer. Nick walked in, and Phyllis assumed he was there to apologize to her. "Are you out of your damn mind?" he barked, adding that he had more evidence that proved Kane was a killer. Nick revealed that Kane had a system of cameras all over the property to watch his guests. Phyllis pointed out that every rich guy who owned an estate had security cameras. Nick continued that even though there were cameras at the murder scene, there was no footage of the crime itself because the screen went blank. Phyllis theorized that the real killer had erased it, and she argued that the footage going missing was only convenient for the killer, not Kane. Nick refused to waste time trying to convince Phyllis of Kane's guilt when she blindly believed everything Kane said. Nick decided to go down the mountain and find out what was going on with the authorities. Phyllis begged him not to go because the hike was dangerous, and she reminded him that the cops were already on the way. Nick sourly considered talking to Kane about how he'd made it back and forth to Genoa City. Phyllis said she wanted to know how Kane had done it too. Nick snarled that Kane would just lie to her, and he pledged to get the police there before Kane or his accomplices could pull anything else. Phyllis cautioned that it would look like Nick was fleeing the scene of the crime. Nick contended that he was more afraid of Kane planting more evidence against him. Nick accused Phyllis of turning her back on their history and years of friendship for a job. He added that he was done letting Kane tell the story, and he wanted professionals to figure out what had happened. Nick stormed off, and Phyllis scolded Sharon for not chiming in. Sharon sided with Nick, noting that something had to be done. Later, Sharon stopped by Nick's sleeping car and insisted on going with him. Nick advised against it, since Adam had told him the trip was steep and treacherous. Sharon reasoned that they could help one another down. Nick pondered whether their lives would ever be normal again. Sharon found it too overwhelming to think about everything that had happened, and she suggested they focus on getting down the mountain and finding the police. There was a knock at the door, and Nick gestured for Sharon to step out of sight. He found Carter and another employee of Kane's there. Carter instructed Nick to go with them, since Mr. Dumas's life was in danger, and Nick's threats were concerning. Nick suggested that they tell Kane he had nothing to worry about until the police got there. Carter announced that he was placing Nick under house arrest. Nick protested that Carter didn't have the authority. Carter flatly stated that it was Mr. Dumas's property, and Mr. Dumas had to take measures to protect himself. Nick angrily questioned whether the goons were in it for the money. Because Kane was nothing but a liar and a murderer, Carter noted that Nick was the primary suspect, and it appeared Nick was trying to escape before the authorities arrived. Nick growled at the men to get out of his way. Carter warned Nick not to make the other guard draw his weapon, since they could make things as difficult as Nick wanted. Sharon stepped forward and offered to alert Victor. Carter informed her that she didn't have a choice but to accompany them as well. In the garden, Jack asked what Billy thought of Nick jumping down Kane's throat. Billy replied that he didn't care, and he turned the topic to how Jack accused Billy of letting him down again. Jack clarified that he'd only said Billy had blindsided him by signing over management of Abbott Communications to Sally, and reversing course about giving up on getting Chancellor back. Billy countered that it was his company, and he'd made the decision he felt was right. Billy was determined to right the wrong done to him by Jill and Victor, and he suspected Jack's anger had less to do with being blindsided and was more about wanting out of their deal. Jack chided Billy for fixating on beating Victor and Jill without a game plan. Billy snapped that Jack wasn't giving him a straight answer, and he flatly asked if Jack was out or not. Jack ranted that Abbott Communications was a non-starter without his backing, yet Billy had felt it was okay to change the rules without informing the person who'd made it possible. Billy announced that he was going to pull out of their partnership and find a new investor, so he and Jack could go their separate ways and forget the partnership had ever happened. Billy stalked off. At the bar, Billy poured a drink and flashed back to Jack, telling him their father would have been proud of Billy's new venture. "Here's to making myself proud with or without you, Jack," Billy toasted to himself as Phyllis approached. She observed that he looked as rough as she felt, and he mentioned having trust issues with his brother. Phyllis guessed Jack didn't like Billy going after Chancellor, and she compared Billy to a cat going after a shiny new object. She lectured that Billy got distracted and never saw any project to its end, and she thought he was treating Abbott Communications like a side hustle. Billy insisted he had vision, and Phyllis conceded that he was great at convincing people to believe in him. Billy complained that everyone who'd pledged to support him had turned their backs as soon as he'd made a decision they didn't like. Phyllis lamented that she'd expected to take on the world with Dumas, but her prospective boss might be up on murder charges even though she knew he was innocent. Phyllis bemoaned that the trip had been a disaster, and it couldn't get any worse. Billy recognized that Phyllis wanted Kane to be innocent, but he asked who else had possessed the means, motive, and opportunity. A deflated Phyllis considered getting drunk, but she figured it would only give her a headache. Billy declared that he wanted Chancellor back, she wanted a job, and they needed Kane to get it done. Phyllis proposed that she and Billy work together to devise a plan to get Kane off the hook. The Young and the Restless recap for Tuesday, July 22nd, reveals that Victor Newman will demand Nick Newman and Sharon Newman's release, while suspicions swirl about Kane Ashby's secret Chancellor motive. First, on Tuesday's Y&R episode, Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins Abbott will be taken aback after spotting Sharon and Nick being detained against their will. Meanwhile, Carter will make sure Nick and Sharon are locked up in what appears to be some sort of storage attic. Sharon will eventually have a panic attack since it'll remind her of being stuck in the clinic. But Nick will tell a family story from London and work to calm her down. On the train, Audra Charles will bump into Victor and act like everything's going according to plan with Kyle Abbott. Victor warned that Audra's got until tonight to keep her end of the bargain. Next, Michael Baldwin will speak with Victor privately and hope they can put their issues aside. After Michael updates Victor on Nick and Sharon being on house arrest, Victor will reject his help and insist on confronting Kane alone. Once Kyle meets up with Diane and Jack, he'll inform them that Audra showed her hand and that he called her out on scheming with Victor. Jack and Diane will push for details on Kyle and Victor's agreement, so Kyle will shock them by confessing the terms. Kyle will admit he signed a contract saying he'd pay $5 million and leave Genoa City if he broke Claire Newman's heart. Kyle will want to find Victor and reveal that the plan to break up his relationship with Claire Newman failed. However, Diane and Jack will think Kyle needs to wait since Victor's going to be hopping mad over Nick's hostage situation. Back with Michael, he'll fill Lauren Baldwin in on his conversation with Victor and how his former boss refused his help. Lauren will be appalled over Victor's continued mistreatment of Michael, considering all the loyalty her husband's given him. There'll also be some talk about Kane possibly knowing some secret inside Chancellor, something that would explain Kane's fixation on going after this company above all others. Over with Nikki Newman, she'll make her way through the maze again and ultimately find Kane. Nick will put Kane on full blast for forcing Nick into captivity since going after her children crosses the line. After Victor appears, he'll warn Kane to release Nick and Sharon. Kane will act like he's protecting himself and wonder what Victor will do if he doesn't go along with his orders, so Victor will insist Kane doesn't want to find out. Victor will also accuse Kane of using his new hostages as bargaining chips for Chancellor, and once again push for their freedom or else. Carter will pop up and whisper to Kane moments later, so Kane will rush off to take care of something with Victor not far behind. As Jack, Diane, and Kyle watch Victor go after Carter, Kyle will push for a word with Claire's grandpa. The Young and the Restless, spoilers for Tuesday, July 22nd, reveal that Nick and Sharon find themselves in grave danger, which could have far-reaching consequences. Plus, Victor makes a demand of Audra, and Nikki is totally over Kane's shenanigans. This is going to be a drama-filled episode, and you won't want to take your eyes off it. Nick is furious he's being framed for Damien's murder, and he's not exactly being quiet about it. Perhaps that's why Nick and Sharon find themselves in a dangerous situation. With a murderer on the loose in the maze, certainly other people in the vicinity could end up being targets, especially if somebody happens to get close to solving the case. Will Nick and Sharon be able to get out of the danger in time? Or will this end up being a big problem for the duo? Victor promised to fund Audra's venture if she seduced Kyle. Audra and Kyle both managed to be in France together without their significant others. It seems like Audra is well on her way since she and Kyle kissed. However, one or the other of them may be having second thoughts. That's not good enough for Victor, though. He demands that Audra hold up her end of their bargain. Otherwise, she risks losing the funding, and she'll once again be out of a job. Nikki is so over Kane in the maze. She just wants to get home to her family. After all, when she left, Cole was ill, and she's worried about Victoria and Claire. Of course, Cole died, and Nikki's family needs her. That's probably why she gives Kane a warning. Will it do anything to change the situation they're in? Probably not just yet. The Young and the Restless spoilers for Wednesday, July 23rd, reveal that Amanda Sinclair will make a disturbing discovery while Kyle Abbott spills the truth. Lily Winters and Phyllis Summers will also get into a fight over Kane Ashby. So here's what Y&R fans can look forward to. For starters, Amanda will witness something troubling. After Amanda catches Kane looking at security footage, she'll fear he's trying to delete it and will strongly advise against doing something so risky. Of course, the first copy of the footage has already been erased, so Kane will confront Amanda and ask if she had something to do with that. Amanda and Kane will get into an argument as they hurl accusations at each other on Wednesday's show. As for the security footage, there's supposed to be a backup copy after 24 hours have passed. Will Kane find that someone has managed to delete that footage too? Over with Lily and Phyllis, they'll have a confrontation of their own. Since Lily will dig her heels in when it comes to Kane's guilt, Phyllis will rush to his defense. That'll bring plenty of tension as Lily badmouths Kane while listening to Phyllis argue there has to be more to the story. Phyllis just won't buy the idea that Kane would have been reckless enough to kill Damian Kane like that. Lily and Phyllis may eventually get updates on Nick Newman and Sharon Newman being on house arrest. Although Phyllis is trying to be loyal to Kane, she may have a problem with this whole hostage situation. Next, Kyle will have some big news to share with Nikki Newman, who'll find out Victor Newman hired Audra Charles to blow up Kyle's romance with Claire Newman. Nikki will know that absolutely sounds like something Victor would do, so she may believe Kyle and worry about whatever her husband might pull next. The Young and the Restless spoilers say Kyle will plan on confronting Victor the first chance he gets, but he'll have to wait until Victor's done trying to get Nick and Sharon released. The Young and the Restless spoilers reveal that Y&R head writer and executive producer Josh Griffith recently talked about the end of the France storyline. More danger is brewing before everyone returns to Genoa City, so let's look at what Griffith had to say in a new interview with Sod. For starters, Josh Griffith spilled that Murder on the Orient Express inspired this story, though he ultimately didn't confine his characters completely to the train. Fans have also seen the maze, garden, dining area, and plenty of other lovely spots on Kane Ashby's summer estate. This storyline was designed as an exciting strategy to reveal Aristotle Dumas' true identity and reintroduce Kane to the canvas, all while connecting him to many key players. Naturally, some murder and mayhem were necessary for drama's sake, which meant Damian Kane had to go. Now that chaos has exploded, Josh Griffith promised there's even more peril to come. Viewers will definitely see some other scares and injuries before this story reaches its conclusion. It's safe to say that danger continues to loom in a big way, putting our core characters in serious jeopardy, Griffith teased. Despite Lily Winters' anger and all the blame she's throwing at Kane over Damian's demise, there's still hope for their future together. Griffith praised Billy Flynn and Crystal Khalil's on-screen chemistry before hinting about their characters' next chapter, which fans definitely won't want to miss. Of course, viewers are wondering what's going to happen for Kane, Lily, and everybody else once the turmoil in Nice is finally over. After everyone returns to GC, Griffith insisted there'll be some new challenges to tackle, especially for Kane. It will be an ever-changing chess game as he tries to figure out who is a friend or a foe, Griffith said, and making matters worse is that several of his opponents may team up to take him down. The Young and the Restless spoilers reveal that Kyle Abbott's makeout trap went too far. So will Claire Newman end up fuming over all that inappropriate Audra Charles kissing? Kyle is acting smug and victorious, but he still crossed the line with Audra. Of course, Kyle's motive was to see how far Audra was willing to go. But was that really necessary? The moment Audra leaned in for that first kiss, Kyle should have pulled back and delivered his "I'm on to you" speech. Instead, Kyle kept playing the game and got on top of Audra in bed while wearing only a towel. Audra and Kyle were kissing like crazy, so what if Claire had been there to witness all that? You can bet Claire wouldn't have given Kyle the green light. Kyle may think he's won, but what happens if he goes home and gloats to Claire about his trap paying off? Claire may not have the reaction Kyle's expecting, especially since her emotions are all over the place due to Cole Howard's death. After Claire grills Kyle about how everything played out, she may be appalled over how inappropriate the whole thing was. Kyle is supposed to be committed to Claire, so he shouldn't have had his lips all over Audra for any reason, including to prove he was right about Audra and Victor Newman's plot. Claire may have a big problem with Kyle playing games in Nice while she was home grieving alone. Although Kyle didn't know about Cole's demise due to lack of cell service, it's still going to sting that he was busy with Audra, while Claire was in mourning. Kyle's actions were disgusting and arguably a major betrayal of Claire's trust. It's not like Kyle had told Claire that he was going to set Audra up for this fall and make out with her in the process. Y&R fans know this is Claire's first real relationship, so things have always felt a bit juvenile anyway, almost like a high school romance. The fact that Kyle was kissing Audra without permission may still be a huge deal to Claire, particularly when she's in such an emotionally vulnerable state. The Young and the Restless spoilers say Kyle might get that smirk wiped right off his face, so stay tuned for updates on any blow-up news that might be brewing with Claire. The Young and the Restless spoilers. The tension in Genoa City has reached an unbearable pitch, a suffocating pressure centered on a single vanished item, a poisoned bottle of bourbon. Its absence has become more dangerous than its presence, transforming from a piece of evidence into the cornerstone of an invisible war. Loyalties are fracturing, truths are twisting into traps, and the line between predator and prey has blurred completely. While the GCPD scoured the city, the bottle remained a ghost haunting the investigation. A deliberate act by someone who knows precisely how to manipulate the game. Suspicion, like a dark mold, grew in the shadows, and it wasn't long before it fell upon Nick Newman. GCPD's own Chance Chancellor was the first to voice it, believing Nick had hidden the bottle in a desperate bid to protect himself or someone else. Yet, Nick's demeanor screamed innocence. He wasn't calculating, he was unraveling. His confusion was raw, his denials frantic. He insisted he was being framed, a pawn in a nightmare he couldn't comprehend. The choice of weapon, a rare bourbon beloved by Kane Ashby, was a terrifyingly personal message, proving the architect of this chaos knew their victims intimately. Just as the whispers about Nick reached a fever pitch, the true target was revealed in horrifying fashion. The plot was never just about the missing bottle, it was a prelude to an attack. The victim wasn't Kane, but another man who favored the same brand, Billy Abbott. The trap was sprung at a dimly lit bar, a place of comfort and routine for Billy. He ordered his favorite drink, unaware that the poison had returned, not in the bottle, but waiting for him in a glass. With the careless confidence that has defined his life, Billy drank. The world shifted. A sudden sharp burn, a wave of dizziness, and the glass shattered on the floor, a warning bell that rang far too late. He collapsed, and chaos erupted. Billy survived, but the attack escalated the crisis. The mystery deepened when Chance, doubting Nick's guilt, made a shocking discovery. In the nightstand of Nick's private bedroom at the Newman Ranch, he found it, the poisoned bourbon bottle. Confronted with the damning evidence, Nick crumbled not with guilt, but with utter disbelief. He had no memory of seeing it, let alone hiding it in his own room. The evidence was perfect, too perfect. For Chance, it became clear Nick wasn't the careless criminal. He was a meticulously chosen scapegoat. Someone had planted the bottle with surgical precision, framing him beyond any reasonable doubt. Now, a new, terrifying game is afoot. Billy, back from the brink, is obsessed with finding his would-be killer. Kane is spiraling into paranoia, realizing he could have just as easily been the target. And Nick, despite his innocence, is trapped in a cage of accusation built by a phantom enemy. A mastermind is watching from the shadows, an expert conductor who has only just begun their symphony of destruction. The bottle has been found, but the real poison, distrust, fear, and revenge, is just beginning to spread. Another death has rocked the young and the restless. This time, Damien is the one to bite the dust after being stabbed in the back. However, Damien's death isn't sitting right with fans who believe a twist is coming. Viewers suspected that the France trip would be the beginning of a murder mystery. Their hunch was right when Damien was killed when someone threw a dagger into his back. The search is on for the killer, who is still roaming around the chateau. While some fans are playing detective, others are wondering if Damien is gone for good. On Y&R, characters have a habit of returning from the dead. So, could this be the case for Damien? Many fans on Reddit seem to think so. One user believes it's a ruse by Kane and Damien. Whiskey drug simulated death. Kane took the antidote ahead of time. Kane and Damien are in cahoots. Reason Damien go the invite. Kane can't call the local authorities because Damien's kicking back in the chalet. I thought maybe the whole murder was staged by Kane, Damien, and Holden from the beginning of this Aristotle Dumas storyline. With a soap, anything is possible, one viewer responded. Another fan theorized that this is Damien's plot against Kane. Maybe Holden and Damien have a plan to get back at Kane for firing them. Could Damien have faked his death? Or is this part of a scheme by him and Kane? If so, what's the motive? These are some of the many questions lingering as Y&R's murder mystery plays out. Only time will tell if Damien makes a return sometime down the road. In the upcoming episode of the CBS soap opera The Young and the Restless, airing on July 22, 25, trouble is building fast, especially for the Newman family. Nick and Sharon are in serious danger far from home, while Victor and Nikki are doing everything they can to protect their loved ones and take control of the situation. As Nick and Sharon stay trapped in a strange place, things begin to take a turn for the worse. Back in Genoa City, Nikki goes head-to-head with Kane and gives him a strong warning. At the same time, Victor turns up the heat on Audra, demanding that she follow through with an important promise. With secrets, tension, and risky moves all in play, viewers can expect this episode to shake up several major storylines. Nikki on The Young and the Restless has always been very protective of her family, and now she's more alert than ever. With people still unsure about who killed Damien Kane, and some thinking Kane may be involved, Nikki decides to talk to Kane face-to-face. She gives him a strong warning and makes it clear that messing with the Newman family, especially Victor, is a big mistake. Even though Kane says he's not guilty, Nikki doesn't believe him and plans to keep digging until she finds the truth. Nikki doesn't yet know that her son Nick is being held somewhere against his will, but once she finds out, things can get even worse for Kane. Whether Kane did something wrong or not, Nikki is watching him closely and won't let anyone threaten her children. After being caught off guard and locked up, Nick and Sharon now find themselves stuck together in a strange room on The Young and the Restless. What started as a secret mission has quickly turned into a nightmare, and Carter is looking more suspicious by the minute. Nick and Sharon have to stay calm and work together if they want to escape, but the danger around them keeps growing. There are armed guards involved, and there's a chance the real person behind Damien's murder is nearby. Tuesday's episode of The Young and the Restless will build up to something intense. The threat is getting worse, and someone is expected to get hurt later this week because of it. Audra on The Young and the Restless has been taking risks, and now the pressure is even greater. Victor wants fast results from her, and he expects her to break up Kyle and Claire immediately. If she doesn't, he won't give her the money he promised for her Vibrante project. Even though Kyle is starting to see through her tricks, Audra isn't giving up yet. She'll try to come up with a new plan to stay on Victor's good side and protect her career. But if she pushes things too far, she can end up losing it all. With Victor keeping a close eye on her, Audra has to be very careful with her next move. Y&R head writer Josh Griffith gives a preview of what fans can expect. The Genoa City crew has been in Nice for many weeks. So much has happened, but the GC residents have no idea. Everyone in Nice has no access to cell or internet service. Kane made sure they were sufficiently cut off from the world. But eventually, they will have to return at some point. The Young and the Restless head writer Josh Griffith gave a look at what's next. Kane claims that he's changed. He's no longer the scheming guy who's up to no good. But everyone else would beg to differ, especially his ex-wife Lily. Griffith told Soap Opera Digest that Kane has some work to do when everyone returns to Genoa City. He will have to prove that he's a good guy. Lily isn't the only one who can't trust him. No one is sure what to make of him. Not only is Kane having to contend with everyone's reaction to his deception, but the party guests are now accusing him of murder, Griffith said. It's not a good look. Damien was found dying in Kane's arms, the same Damien who was romancing Lily. Even Amanda doesn't want to help Kane. Kane believes that someone has it out for him. Now, he's not the only one who's in danger. He put all of his guests in danger too. We're still convinced that Kane entrapped his guests at the French estate. Griffith teased that the killer is out for more than one person. It's safe to say that danger continues to loom in a big way, putting our core characters in serious jeopardy, he added. Even if the killer is found, Kane still has to make amends. He's been snapping up properties, and he has eyes on everyone's companies. He will have to prove that he's a changed man. Kane has his work cut out for him when everyone returns to Genoa City. It will be an ever-changing game as he tries to figure out who is a friend or a foe. And making matters worse is that several of his opponents may team up to take him down, Griffith shared. Who is getting away with way too much in Genoa City? Genoa City isn't just about billion-dollar boardrooms and glamorous galas. It's also home to some of the most shocking crimes daytime TV has ever seen. With Damien's murder sending shockwaves through the young and the restless community, it's time to ask the question, which of our soapy elite deserves to be locked up the longest? Let's start with the great Victor Newman. The man's rap sheet is a mile long. From shady business dealings to tampering with evidence and literally burying people alive, Victor has danced around the law more times than we can count. But does he deserve life in prison or just a permanent seat in Judge Judy's courtroom? Next up is dear wife Nikki. Yes, she's a beloved matriarch now, but let's not forget her deadly altercation with Diane Jenkins. Sure, Diane came back from the dead and is living her best happily ever after with Jack, but Nikki still swung that rock and thought she'd ended a life. That alone should have earned her an orange jumpsuit and a cellmate named Big Bertha. Phyllis also deserves an entire wing of her own. She's poisoned people, gaslighted entire families, and even faked her death recently. If Genoa City PD wasn't so easily distracted, Red would have been locked up years ago. Then there's Adam, the resident bad boy with an endless cycle of redemption arcs. He accidentally killed Delia in that hit and run and tried to cover it up. He's poisoned, blackmailed, and schemed his way through more lives than we can list. Adam behind bars? We'd almost miss him, but justice is justice, and don't think we've forgotten about Michael. While he's usually seen as one of the good guys, his shocking past still haunts many. Remember when he tried to rape Christine? Yeah, that was bad. Very bad. And some folks will never forgive him. In fact, there are many who have never bought into his turnaround and still think he should be behind bars. So who deserves the longest sentence? It's a tough call, but in a town where everyone has skeletons in their closets, maybe Genoa City should just build its own maximum security prison. And Audra could win. Kyle was really feeling smug on the July 23rd episode of The Young and the Restless. He bragged to Audra about how he'd figured out her and Victor's plan and was the smartest person in the room yet again. Nothing can stop him now. That may help Kyle sleep at night, but we are actually seeing a way he could lose everything. Kyle is expecting Claire to be sitting at home, patiently waiting for him. After all, he's her first love. It's impossible she could ever find someone better than him. What Kyle doesn't know is that, while he was so bravely resisting Audra in France, Claire lost her dad. She's despondent, to the point of turning to Holden. What if, when Kyle returns home, Claire doesn't want to hear about how faithful he was? Kyle wasn't here to support her through the trauma of Cole's death. And she's not interested in a guy she can't count on. Claire dumps Kyle, and you know what that means? Victor gets to collect the $5 million Kyle promised him in case he ever hurt Claire. Hurting Claire didn't have to mean an affair. Claire was hurt by Kyle's absence. Pay up, little Abbott. To pour salt into that wound, Victor can then turn around and give Audra the $5 million Kyle paid him. She lived up to her part of the bargain. Claire dumped Kyle. The details are irrelevant. They had a deal. So now Audra has Kyle's money. It's a good thing Kyle still has his Nepo baby job. Not so fast, Kai Guy. Jack has put up with so much stupidity from his son. This one is just the last straw. Kyle signed a contract offering Victor money in case he hurt Claire? What kind of dumb, asinine, and dumb move is that? No matter what Diane says, Jack can no longer trust his son's judgment. He can't keep letting him have a substantial position at Jabot.